And feel free to ask questions if you have any different follow-up questions at any point. Just raise your hand and we'll make sure to get a mic to you. All right?
Okay. I'll start first because I don't have much to say. Good morning, people. Okay, I understand that morning. Okay, my sharing this morning is around only one key word, which starts with P, and that's positioning. I find it very important, and I will focus more on the ASEAN region, the way we do things here. Sometimes it is called the ASEAN way. Sometimes people actually overstretch the meaning of ASEAN way. And sometimes people ask me, is there such thing as an ASEAN way? That's the problem. Yeah, that's the problem, because everybody seems to say, especially government will tell you, oh, this is not really the ASEAN way. Then you ask them back, what is it that is ASEANese? Yeah, and you don't get an answer. Positioning of your program would ensure a good takeoff and maturity of the program and sustainability of the program. Yeah. So when I say positioning, first of all, of course, you cannot work on your own. You have to work with, because this is probably young program for the young or by young people. So it is good to get support from local youth organizations. And they are not necessarily limited to the traditional youth organizations. Yeah, because traditional youth organizations, I give an example, every member state of ASEAN has traditional youth organization. There is the PA Youth of Singapore, there is MBM of Malaysia, there's KMPE of Indonesia, All Vietnam Youth Federation, and so on and so forth. Yeah, but they have good things about them. Yeah, they have their own strength, but they have their weakness too. So don't rely only on one local organization. You may ask me, why do you need them? When you go for sponsorship, if you are a new organization and people don't know you, sometimes endorsement and support from more established organizations can help. But beware, do not let them hijack your idea until it becomes theirs and spoil the whole thing. So you have to be very careful. Again, this is the ASEAN way, or is it not the ASEAN way? Second, you have to get civil society to support you. Especially if you are working on very specialized program like education. I'm not talking about government, I'm talking about professional education related networks like Teach for Malaysia or Teach for the Needs in the context of Malaysia. Environment specialist group. If you're talking about human rights, the Bar Council or Association of Lawyers, these are good partners. But of course, it works sometimes by working with government agencies. But government agencies tend to be very condescending, so again, be careful. They may want you to work under their wings, and the moment you appear to be part of the government, then certain segment of young people whom you want to buy in your program may actually be pissed off. I mean, for lack of a better way of saying it. Yeah, and then they run away from your program. Okay, on the ASEAN region specifically, one traditional youth organization that is useful would be the CAYC, the Council for ASEAN Youth Cooperation. They have a website, CAYC, just visit them. But they are an umbrella organization of all the ASEAN National Youth Organization. Yeah, they have their strength because they are directly to the ASEAN Secretariat. But there are also other platforms, for instance, which is very important, is the ASEAN Youth Forum. They meet every year in the country that is at that year chairing ASEAN. So this year, last month, they had their forum in Yangon, and next year is going to be in Kuala Lumpur. These are good, platform for you to share. For civil society, it would be good to look at the ASEAN Civil Society Conference or ASEAN Civil Society Forum. Again, they meet every year once in the country that is chairing ASEAN. But of course, they meet once a year, but they have a host of activities every year, along the year. If you are organizing university students targeted program, a good platform would be the ASEAN University Network. It's a network of ASEAN universities. Almost all ASEAN universities are on that one. If you're working on issues, for instance, if you're working on education, then it is good to see ASED, ASED, what's that? ASEAN Education Ministers Meeting, or SIAMO, Southeast Asian Ministers, something like that, like SIAMEO, SEAMEO, Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization. Yeah, they meet once a year, but yeah, they have subcommittee meetings. If you are in human rights, it's good to look at AICHA, ASEAN Charter for Human Rights. They have their own secretariat. Now, a very, very important, because if it is on youth, you cannot miss AMMY, ME, the ASEAN Meeting of Ministers of Youth. They meet twice a year, but they have, as I said, some activities, subcommittee meetings throughout the year or on a quarterly basis. So it's good to get into this networking and say if I hear somebody wants to do ASEAN Youth Parliament. Now, if you do ASEAN Youth Parliament, it's good to get AMMY to support you. Because what is that the group? Because no point having ASEAN Youth Parliament and then that's the end of it. You must get your voice to the ASEAN Summit. And to go to the ASEAN Summit, the best way is to go through AMMY. I would suggest you go to CAYC, because if you go AMMY, they will ask you, okay, this is ASEAN bureaucracy. They will ask you if you see as CAYC. CAYC don't mind you bypassing, but it is AMMY who will ask you whether you have spoken to CAYC. So just say hello to CAYC, but write to the minister who is hosting. And you are lucky because next year the minister who's hosting is Khairi Jamaluddin, and you can start writing to him this year because Khairi Jamaluddin knows about YCLI. Okay. The most important happening for ASEAN, if you want to sell ASEAN to sponsors within ASEAN, is ASEAN Community 2015. That is the branding for ASEAN 2015. It's like you cannot sell anything without mentioning ASEAN Community 2015. What does it mean? It means political, and there are three pillars. It means politics and security. It means business and entrepreneurship. It also means social culture. But don't worry about those jargons, because most ASEAN officials also don't understand what it means. But they like to see that they are part of ASEAN community. So is companies, yeah? They don't really understand what ASEAN Community 2015 is all about, but they want to be on board. So bring them on board. So you become the bridge between them and the ASEAN thing. So that's just my personal thing. My last point about ASEAN is this. Don't think ASEAN Secretariat have money. The only money that ASEAN have is ASEAN Foundation. But the best way to work with ASEAN Foundation is on a one-to-one basis, a dollar to dollar. They don't have that policy. There's no such thing as dollar to dollar. Don't see the ASEAN Foundation and say Saifuddin said there is a dollar to dollar policy. No, there's no dollar to dollar policy. But they would like to see, basically you don't see them with an empty glass. Because when you see them with and this is also my experience with most sponsors, they don't like to see people coming with an empty glass. Because when it is an empty glass, some sponsor might think that you don't know how to hold the glass, so whatever water in it has been, spilled, or there is some hole in the glass because of that it is empty, or you're so greedy. Every water that comes, every inch of water that comes to the glass, you drink it in one, once. So they want to see at least some water, because with a little bit of water, then they say, at least I can trust this glass. Thank you.
Thank you. It was
Yeah,
just for everyone. I just want everyone to know.
All of them have their website, ASEAN Foundation. You just Google ASEAN Foundation. I don't have the exact address.
ASEAN Foundation lists all the acronyms that you just mentioned.
Pardon? No. I think you go to ASEAN Secretariat website. Then you have all those links. Yeah.
So he asked, where could he find information on all the different organizations and foundations and acronyms?
The official ASEAN website will have all those. Yeah.
And is it very elitist or it's open to all?
Okay, it's a very good point, because Prime Minister Najib, who will assume chair of ASEAN next year, have publicly made it known to people that yes, ASEAN is still very elitist, is still very formal, very governmental, very political, but he said that it is about time that we make ASEAN less elitist and more people-centered. So you can actually run on that. Yeah.
Also, if there are more questions, you can just go to the mics so that everybody can hear you.
The education report, Centre and all tables on that goes the list of our various ASEAN organisations.
Before I start, that right there is a project. Maybe one of you guys can just sit down and list all of this down and put it on the side. And get people to sort of as part of your product. Because I think, I'm sure you guys don't know, right? So that in itself is already something that you can add value to this kind of work in ASEAN, and then share among your members, and make it fun that other people would see it as well. But I think you can easily do that. I'm not sure how. It's not like I know how to do it, but I see that you're very savvy with developing stuff online. So, anyways, okay, I'm gonna change gears a little bit, and I'm gonna sort of talk about sustainability and challenges at the program and organization level. Now, from my experience, normally there are a few different parts of this. Okay, number one, there's this problem when it comes to sustaining the momentum of the project in itself. Okay, so that's basically one area. Number two, which everybody seems to be concerned about, and I don't think is the biggest problem, is actually an effect, is sustaining funding for your project. Okay, but a lot of people just think that this is the only, if you have continuous money, that your project would have a long span. I do not believe in that. And number three is sustaining the idea and the momentum to yourself, the person who created the project. Because two years down the road, you might totally lose interest, right? You want to do other things. You burn out, or I don't know, it's normal. Nobody's asking you to continue doing whatever you're designing now, 15 years from now. You have the right to go to and do other things as well. So those are the three sort of main challenges that I see kept on happening. It happened to me, it happened to a lot of the organizations that I have partnered with. Okay, now let's look one by one. Not in detail, because we're going to need a long time to talk about this in detail. But number one, sustaining the momentum and the drive for your project itself, the idea of your project, among the community. Okay? Now, the best way of doing all of this is not at the end of the life cycle of the project. It starts at the beginning. Okay? The moment you come out with an idea, as you move on, you have to continuously think about things like this. When it comes to the last 3 months before your funding ends, or the last month when you suddenly realize that nobody actually gives 2 minutes to whatever you're designing or implementing, or you yourself felt like, oh, you know what, I got this amazing job, I'm moving countries, you know, this is an amazing opportunity for me, what do I do now? When it comes to that point, right, guys, it's a bit too late. You know, but this is a consistent mistake, right? We only think about this kind of thing when it's really right in front of our face. So number one, you got to start thinking about these things at the beginning of the project. Okay, let's go back. To sustain the interest and the momentum of your project and your design, you know, with you know, your target group and with your partners. Here, I think you have to be very flexible and you have to be able to absorb you know, new ideas and changes in the way that you present your project. Whatever you designed last night or still designing now or tomorrow is good for maybe now, but 3 months down the road, there's going to be a new thing. There's going to be a new tool. There's going to be new people. You got to always be very flexible, proactive in attracting this, you know, including it in your project implementation. You know, even as simple as changing colors sometimes works very well. Even as simple as, you know, putting up a new song, maybe, you know, at the background of your website or whatever actually helps. Using new tools and stuff like that. You have to continue doing this aside from just implementing your project. Okay? So that's one way. Okay, and I'm just going to say that because there's other people going to speak as well, but we can continue discussing about it later. Okay. Now, number two is obviously sustaining funding, right? So a lot of people say, oh, we have 3 years funding. So they come to the Asia Foundation, for instance, and you know, they ask for a grant. We write them a grant, $50,000 US. Okay, go out, do your work for 3 years, and they're all happy, because they have money for 36 months. Do you know when they worry about money? They worry again on month 35, right? So for 35 months, they're all happy, no issues, let's just do this. That's natural, but that's not the right way of doing it. You know, getting the funds that you want doesn't mean that you have to stop thinking about it. Because, I mean, we have this water crisis in Malaysia now, in the city of Selangor, and I like to make this as an example. It is amazing that a country like Malaysia, tropical country, has water crisis, right? I mean, if you've been here for how many days and you see the amount of rain and stuff like that, I'm no scientist, and they kept on telling me, oh yeah, you know, it doesn't matter if you get rain or whatever, water crisis is a different thing. But as a layman, I just find it quite amazing. But what I thought is interesting and I want to share with you is exactly my point. We do not worry about this until we don't have it anymore. And when we don't have it, we want it tomorrow. Which is unfortunately, guys, that's just not going to work. You know, you got to work on these kind of things, right? So always worry about funding, even if you've just signed a contract. Even if you've just signed the agreement and the money is in your bank, you've got to consistently worry about it. Worry in a good sense. I'm not asking you to lose sleep and burn out and stuff like that. You know, worry in terms of, you know, being creative to try and sustain and think of new ideas and how to bring it. Okay? Now, what are the new ideas? You know, I'm a firm believer that this whole thing about someone writing a proposal, making an elevator pitch to undersecretary and ending it with like, if you have funding, you have to support us. All of that is going to die. That's not the future. That was what people have been doing in 1960s to until unfortunately now. If you continue doing that, you cannot sustain your project. The world we are moving in has a different way of dealing into this, has a more creative way, and you have to think creatively. It's not just about having a good pitch and presenting it. I told my group that do not ask for money. You are not pitching for money. You want buy-in of the idea. That's all. You stop there. How do you get the money? It's a different way, right? There are many other ways. I think Eddie and a few others have presented about, crowdfunding, crowdsourcing. I mean, the world is, is so creative today. It's amazing how you can fundraise, right? I met this organization who did social work, in California, but they were Indonesians actually. But they went to a conference and they learned something and they raised funding through it. It has nothing to do about writing proposals and presenting it. They actually designed an online game that actually gave them revenue to sustain their project, which I thought was brilliant. The world is actually moving into that direction. Okay? Do not waste so much time thinking that you can always go to foundations, you can always go to the State Department and have a great pitch and then get them to give you money. That, my friends, is going to end pretty soon. Okay? That's number 2. Now number 3, and I think it's the key, and I think it's the key reason why good ideas, like I said in the beginning of my, the first day when I met you, good ideas always fail, good projects always fail, and I think the key challenge here is to actually sustain this interest that you have. You yourself have. Look at yourself and look at where you're going to be 5 years from now. You're going to start thinking about this kind of things at the beginning of the life of your project. Okay? A lot of NGOs that I work with, a lot of foundations that I work with are driven by one person. And this is a problem. Or maybe 2. Or at most 3. But normally if it's like 2 or 3, they'll tend to fight and then they'll end up just, being led by one. People have very strong personalities, I do understand that. But as leaders, and I always say this, and I think I shared with my team, the best leader is a leader who leaves his organization and his ideas intact and for other people to carry it through. The worst leader is a leader that leaves and everything crumbles. You have to always remember that. You have to think about second layer of leadership. You're not going to bring this to grave. You're not going to always, and it is not right to do that. And you cannot always take ownership of these kind of things. You have to always think about the next layer. Who's the next person? And I'm going to tie back in my first earlier presentation about building constituencies. Not just with other organizations around you, so you can use that to sustain your ideas and your tools, but within your group. Who's going to support you? Who's going to be there when you fall sick? Who's going to be there when you need to take that leave because you need to send your kid somewhere, or I don't know, your wife needs more time with you and say that, you've been giving too much time for the community, how about your family, right? So we are all human beings, we have other things to do in life. You guys have other things to do in life. You got to think about these kind of things. Who's going to step in and take that leadership and do it when you're not available? And most importantly, when you decide to move on, plan ahead of moving on from your project at the beginning of the project. It is like writing a will. Writing a will is very, very good. It's very healthy. But I know in a lot of Asian cultures, they don't like to write wills because they're afraid of dying. Now that's counterproductive. You write will when you're still okay, not on your deathbed, because you can't think properly when you're about to die, So start writing your will. Start having all these people building this constituency so that when you want to move on, this great idea you had 10 years ago, 5 years ago can be continued. That's all I have for now. I'm going to go around. I'm still going to be around. We can talk about this, but I'm going to pass this to my fellow presenters. Thank you.
So I have some follow-up questions. You said a lot, but I have some follow-up questions because you made really, really good points. But you talked about the different new tools, and nowadays there are so many tools that have been created, so many different resources, so many different new initiatives. What's the best way to stay updated on them?
Okay.
And also the will. You talked about the will, and so then I started to think about team building and what's the best way. How do you build a strong team and make sure yourself as the leader or just a part of a team? How do you make sure that you have that will? What are the steps to creating that and making sure that you are sustaining your team?
Okay, great questions. Number 1, how do you build this, knowledge? What do you do?
How do you be creative in terms of thinking about, how to expand, fundraising ideas or approaches? I can't give you one specific answer to that, but there are a few movements out there that's been engaging organizations like yours or the ones that you are creating. And I have to say that the US is actually, taking leadership in terms of this. A lot of the European-based NGOs or Australian or Asians are not up there yet. But in the US, there's this very strong movement to look at creative ways on how you can, raise and continue, funding your projects. One of the best gatherings I thought that I have ever been to is actually being organized on a yearly basis in California. Okay, and I heard that they're gonna start this in Asia as well. So if I have that information, I'll try and share it with state and maybe alumni wherever you can see it. It's called SOCAP, Social Capital Conference. I don't know if you guys have heard it. Whoever is based in California, maybe you've been there. This conference is so amazing. It brings about people like you and people a little bit higher and corporations and angel investors as well into one space for 4 days. And people just talk about, exchange ideas and talk about how they want to move their project forward. If you just attend and mingle around, I can tell you in 4 days, you just have amazing ideas, even if you don't get money, right? So SOCAP is a good start, but it is not cheap. You still have to buy your air tickets and stuff like that. Now, you got to deal with those kind of problems. I can't give you all the answers to your questions, right? I hope they start in Asia because it's going to be a very good platform. So that's one useful way. The other is, of course, you have to always be, it's a globalized world. Look at other initiatives, great initiatives, learn from them. If you can't interview them, read about them. There's so many things in the internet, right? And get in touch and always. Well, the point that I raise is that I don't want you to always think that there is this simple, not simple, but there is this one source or a few sources of funding that you always have to attack. Let's just think that, State Department has this trillions of US dollars that they're going to dish out every year and, we're going to get some of that money. And if we don't we get so depressed, we want to stop moving forward. That's not the way. That's what I'm trying to drive, okay? Drive to. Now the second question was the will, right? Now again at SOCAP, I met this amazing bunch of people who actually started a card deck. The cards that you play, right? For poker or whatever. They started a card deck, and I wish that I still have it. I lost it. Because when I came back, I shared it with so many people and I think someone nicked it. But it is so amazing that the cards, instead of have spades and diamonds or whatever, right? It has things like, okay, look to your left and do you think he is your ally? And blah, blah, and stuff like that. Now, this is one tool of how to build constituencies. You have to think strategically. Look around your table. These people are not the same as you. They think differently, they have different personalities, they have different background. Okay? You have to think very strategically, knowing who is your supporter. Who is, people who are not your supporter, they are critical, for instance. I'm just starting with your group. You can apply this, of course, to general life as well, to other organizations as well. Who is maybe going to be that person that you want to develop because you think, this person have a lot of capabilities and stuff like that. Who do you need to win most? Who's your greatest enemy? Who's your greatest ally? Stuff like that, right? Now, you have to always train yourself to think strategically, not just within the small group that you have, but the larger group that connects with you within, on your work. So this is the whole process of writing a will. You don't just sit down there and look at people and say, okay, you're going to be my next one. I'm going to give you 30%. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. That's when you're going to fail, because you have to be strategic in terms of writing your will. You have to know how to sustain. I mean, the whole reason why you want to write a will is because you want to sustain this project, right? This movement, right? So you gotta do it that way. But one key thing before I stop, right? In writing your will, in moving forward, you have to remember one thing, yeah? And this is also one of the biggest problems, is that people feel that they have 100% ownership towards this idea and how it should look like after they leave. This is a consistent problem. It's a problem in the political system, it's a problem in a lot of social movements and stuff like that. You cannot have that mentality. You have to let it go and let people design it. You cannot be, a freak in terms of, why? Because a lot of people write wills and then they give to someone else, and then someone else does it, they're not happy, and then they kill that person and that idea. That's just, so that's not what you want to do. So you have, while you write that will, while you think strategically about people around you, you have to educate yourself as well. There will be a point when you have to let go. It's okay. It's okay. You're not the most brilliant person in the world. I can tell you that now. Okay? There are other smart people as well who's going to maybe do this a lot better than you. Alright? Thank you.
No other questions? All right.
Just one.
Oh, there's one. Yes.
I think it's writing a book.
Sorry?
He said, have you considered writing a book? I think he's saying that you talk a whole lot.
Do you want to sit in front of me and help me write a book? I mean, we can do that, man. I haven't found someone who can take this nonsense that I spew, every minute and actually write it down. But if you're willing to do that, let's talk.
50-50.
$1 to dollar. There's a question there at the back.
Yes. You can, there's a mic in the, he's bringing the mic around for you.
Good morning. Sir, you mentioned about the importance of sustainability and expansion, right? But I'm more curious on do you have any advice or a simpler mechanism in terms of monitoring and evaluating projects? Because I think for me it's also an important aspect that we have to consider.
Okay, good question. Okay, there's a biasness in my answer. Okay, before I answer your question, I'll give you my bias first. Monitoring and evaluation is great. You all have to do it. If you can't monitor and evaluate something, don't do it. Yeah? It's very good. There is a danger in this. A template for monitoring and evaluation. That's what you're asking for. And that's the danger. And I think a lot of donors, I don't come from a donor organization, but we make grants. We sometimes fall into this mistake as well. We come up with excessive and complicated grids to try and, fulfill our needs, thinking that if they follow this methodology, they can evaluate, their projects. Guys, I don't think that's right. Okay? While there are tools out there to help you monitor and evaluate, this is a very complex area. It sounds very simple. You know why it sounds very simple? Because we tend to come out with sort of like, checkbox kind of, evaluation and stuff like that. But monitoring and evaluation, if you think about it, it is social science. While there are science to it, there are ways to do it, but it is not simple, and often it is very expensive. I don't know if you guys have heard about impact evaluation, right? I mean, impact evaluation is great. I'm a fan, of Esther Duflo and all of that. I've worked with that, on some impact stuff. But again, it takes 7 years for someone to actually master what this lady is talking about. Impact value, it is very complex, right? You get PhDs on these kind of things. MIT and Berkeley is already doing this, right? So yes, it's extremely important. But how do you monitor and how do you evaluate? I cannot give you a tool. Because if I do that, I'm going against what I believe in. I can give you some advice on how you should start doing it, but you really have to look into the details of what really means to your community and your project to really evaluate and tell people the story that you think, why you think your program has achieved its target, right? Do not be too obsessed with this grid and this, you know what, if I share with you the kinds of evaluation forms that are out there, you probably faint, right? Because if you run like a $20 million a year project, which I've done in Afghanistan, you look at the evaluation form, you can't even run your project. It takes as much time for you to evaluate your project as much as you run your project, right? But these things are made complex because donors have to also answer to their constituencies, taxpayers. These are, if it's private foundations, board of directors, they have to justify why this funding went through and what is the impact. So I don't want you to worry about that so much. I want you to worry about how you feel what you have seen actually impacts the people. Develop from that and tell your story. So use these forms, don't start with it. Use it as something to help you to get somewhere. Okay? I don't know if I'm making sense, but a lot of people fail because they think if I complete this Annex A of reporting, which is impact evaluation, then I'm done. It's not that. The forms are not supposed to do that. Okay?
Thank you for the answer. I do understand the concern that it's very complex. So that's why I raised if you have any advice that you can give, and how do we simplify things. Well, for me, I'm working in the development research field, and we do value evidence-based approach. And yes, I'm quite familiar on research, on result-based management and M&Es and what have you. But with that, of course, another question, a follow-up question to what you have raised. With that, do you advise that we also, before we conduct the project, we also have to get database to see what is the existing environment in our target areas, so that later on we will see how we improve and what we've done during our implementation. Do you think that is an important aspect in coming up with the project?
That's a lead question because I have to answer yes. But I'm going to be answering yes anyways because, as I said, I'm a very big fan of impact evaluation. So for you guys who don't know or have not been exposed to impact evaluation, one of the most important things about impact evaluation is you have to do that survey before you start your project. Monitoring and evaluation, you do that survey at the end. You ask people to write the questionnaires at the end. Unfortunately, if you do that, you don't know how they were before they start. You only know how they are after you end, right? So yes, you have to build it in, okay? You have to be creative in terms of raising your funds because not many donors, there's this joint. Seriously, right? Let's be frank, that's this joint. We want to fulfill the evaluation, the impact, the causes. We want to know all this data, but more often than not, there's not many donors who's willing to pay for it. They're more eager to pay for your activities, right? So if you want to collect that data, and I totally agree with you, it's extremely important that you collect your data before your program starts. I don't know about a lot of these projects, but I know about my group. right? So they want to do inter-religious harmony and stuff like that. I told them, like, look, before you talk to these people, you cannot just make assumptions that they're gonna start killing people of other religion. You need to have hard data to back your statistics up, to back your thesis, your hypotheses, right? So this is when what you're saying is very important. You have to design that survey. You have to do this baseline kind of, data gathering so that then you can follow through and see at what stage, that you have impacted and how they have changed. It's a continuous process. Now, how are you going to get that funded? It's a different story. A lot of people have these sensitivities. They know it's extremely important to do this, but no one's going to pay for it. Trust me. No one's going to pay for it. They like to pay for activities, but they don't see that evaluation is part of the activity. But they want you to do it because they will help, justify to their constituencies. But sometimes, in order for you to evaluate, it's actually more expensive than your project itself. Trust me. I have seen a proposal where the impact evaluation cost is 3 times more expensive than the project. That's just how it is. So this is where I'm telling you that this whole idea about sending a proposal and asking one traditional, we can call a lot of the donors, the conventional donors as traditional donors, to pay fully for your project is ending. We've got to look into other ways. There's a lot of money around the world. You're just not tapping into all these other areas, Our State Department is not paying me to say this, but seriously, stop bothering them. I'm serious, guys. It's just, it's counterproductive. It's not going to get you anywhere if you continue to knock on doors and ask for money like that. You have to be more creative.
Okay. You got a question?
I just want to add something to what you just shared, Harizal. I think it's very, very good pointers that you've given them. I think it's also important to agree upfront with whoever you're getting your grant or your funding from. What are the specific outcomes you are going to measure? And if that's going to change along the way, I think that's something it's good to get it in writing and keep it as specific as possible and minimal subjective outcomes. Because what we think or what you think in your mind as fantastic may not be what they have in mind as fantastic. And often, I think a lot of projects, it becomes an issue at the end because people have not agreed upfront what is the outcome. And perhaps it was the donor is expecting the donor's expectations is something that takes 3 phases of the project. Our expectation is in the first phase of the project. And it's important to be very, very clear about that. I just wanted to add that, that's all. Yeah. Who do I give to? Can we just take this one question and then we pass it to her? She's been raising her hand very tightly.
I mean, all of us can answer, yeah? I think I'm getting myself to trouble now. So
No, that's
I'm
okay.
sharing the responsibility here with you as well.
No, so actually everything you've been saying.
The first day was all very interesting, and I like that the guy brought up the idea that you should write a book, like why NGOs fail, because it's a lot of insight.
So people will hate me.
No,
They hate me already for saying things like this. If I put it on print, I need a new identity.
Yeah, but that's why NGOs fail, and we need more, better NGOs that are not just there sucking funding from donors. Anyway, so I like, the organization that I work for in the Philippines have worked with the Asia Foundation in the Philippines. And while I was looking through some of the files, I discovered that, so there was this one project on good governance. It was essentially an anti-corruption website, and the grant was just for 3 years. And so I found that after the grant, duration was finished, the project just ended. And it was really, really good because it promoted a lot of discourse and corruption, and it really raised the interest of people in good governance. And in a country like the Philippines, that's very, very, very important. So a while ago when you were saying, when you were talking about how you can't just, you can't just make a project and then, do it for 3 years and then once the funding ends, that's it. It doesn't make much sense at all. So like in what ways do you think can NGOs become more sustainable without having to, without having to just keep on asking for funding? Because for example, there are NGOs, for example, that they have a for-profit that funds their non-profit, but I'm not sure if that's a model that will work for all advocacies. Because like maybe for environmental issues that can work, like you create, I don't know, you sell merchandise that can, help your nonprofit, but in a highly charged advocacy like fighting corruption or pushing for human rights. Like how do you make projects on those areas sustainable?
Okay, I'm gonna take that because
Guys, I don't know if we're totally sucking this time. I thought we we're gonna do rounds and talk about these details later because I think there are other presenters. But I'm gonna take that question, right? Okay, just 30 seconds. If you guys don't mind, Startup Malaysia, a little bit of advertisement about the Asia Foundation. You see, we spend just 30 seconds, okay? We spend a lot of our time at the Asia Foundation to try and build the capacity of NGOs that we work with so they can sustain their work. Having said that, we have failed tremendously. Okay? Okay, I'm not saying that we are we have solved the world's problems or NGOs' problems. Okay? That's all about the Asia Foundation. So if you are okay, so I didn't think I used the 30 seconds anyways. But we use a lot of our own funding, to actually do that. Whenever we do a project with state, with DRL, or with USAID, with DFID, with DFAT, or name it, what we do is we use our own funding to try and ensure that these partners that we work with can continue this project beyond the end of their grant. Even by doing that, we fail. Only sometimes we are successful. Okay? Now, why would we fail? We fail because all of that I have presented earlier did not get into the minds of the people who are running the project. And this is the problem, right? If I go and talk to them on a daily basis, they look at me and they say, oh my God, Harizal, you're turning to sound like my dad, right? So I don't know how to drill this into their minds and to make them understand how critical for them to adapt these things. It's not that we've not done it. So this is what I'm trying to share with you guys. If there's someone apart from me who's going to reach out to you and tell you the things that I said and maybe more than what I said, please drill it in your mind and do it. Because you are the only people who can ensure that this will happen. Your donor cannot ensure that it can happen. Your community cannot ensure that this can happen, the continuity. It's up to you. This is the responsibility that you take. Now, let's go into the details of it. How do you do that? Right? That's your next question, right? Okay. One of the things I find amazing about NGOs, we want to address the failures of government initiatives, right? A lot of the things that we do, we are actually addressing those pockets where government has failed to reach. But you know what's really amazing? A lot of NGOs think that they are actually smarter than the governments. They think those people in the offices are dumb. Those people that they go back to ask funding from are actually dumb because they can't do it, so maybe they should pay you to do it. I mean, am I crazy or are we all nuts? Right? These people are not dumb. There is a reason why these things fail. It's not that they are born evil and they suddenly, because of the evilness, they get a job in the government and they ensure certain things fail.
I love that story, but unfortunately it's not true, right? You know, it is not that, my friends. These things are complex. These things are problems, right? Government have thousands of people, millions of dollars at their disposal. They can't do it. What makes you think with 5 people in your organization you can do it? I'm giving you the chance. Prove me you can do it. So why I'm saying this is not to demotivate you. I'm trying to tell you it's more complex than you understand. That is why I always say that NGO development world is a professional engagement. And my problem is that I always work with partners, and when I look at their members of the NGOs and I ask them, why do you do this work? More often than not is if they're mid-career, oh, because you know what, I want to spend more time with my family. I want to send my kids to school, you know, it's NGO, so it's a bit more relaxed. Or, you know, I'm an artist and, you know, nobody wants to employ me, so I become an NGO activist. Guys, that's exactly why we fail. We fail to understand that we are dealing with serious issues here. We want to have fun. Of course we should have fun. But it's not all, I mean, it's all fun, but you got to be serious. You know what I'm saying? You got to grow up and be serious. You want to talk about interreligious harmony, my group. You know how serious and how many people have been killed because they want a program in this area? I mean, guys, reality, right? But I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I respect you for wanting to do it, but you got to be thinking about all these complexities. Okay, how? Again, right? There are examples. So my premise of saying whatever I've just said, that I'm saying that governments are not dumb. Okay? Dumb. Sorry, not dumb. Dumb. Look, if you look at how governments have tried to sustain their initiatives, they have formed partnerships. I'm sure you've heard about public-private partnership. You know, I don't know whether you've learned, but they have tried so many models, they have tried so many approaches to try and make this work. If you think and try and look at their model and absorb it into what you do, of course you have to change it a little bit because you're not government, but there are already, you know, tripartite kind of relationship agreement. You can form coalition between NGOs and governments and other donors and stuff like that. Look at what ADB is doing. Look at what World Bank is doing. Look, I'm not promoting all these organizations, don't get me wrong, because as you grow up and when you start working with them, you'll realize there are problems as well. But look, there are problems everywhere. So what I'm trying to say is that you can learn from some of these models that's been tried out. You can look at why it has failed and you don't do the same thing, the same mistake. But learn. These people are not dumb. They have specialists, they have PhDs, your lecturers, people who taught you, have worked at the World Bank at the highest stage and have thought about these designs, guys. Look at their designs, right? And try and emulate and try and copy if you can. And develop your own sort of like at your own level, your own track, this kind of partnerships. And I think Dato' Saifuddin is really good at this. So do harass him before he leaves. You know? Okay. I mean, there's a lot more, but seriously, there's other people as well. So let's talk about this during lunch and blah, blah, blah and stuff.
Yeah.
I want to get down. I'm done.
Lawyers.
Thank you so much.
I think my session, we are going to go through it while we are standing. Can we all stand up? I'm going to ask many questions. If you answer the question, you sit. Can we do that?
Yeah, sure.
For those who are married, how do you sustain your marriages?
Huh?
For those of you who are married, how do you maintain, sustain your marriage?
None of them is married. These guys here are married.
I'm married.
Don't show your wife.
Continue supporting each other.
Please don't show your husband to us. For those who are married, how do you sustain the marriage? There are things you do to sustain it. I don't want you to give the answer. But since you volunteer to answer, you sit. Number two, a good number of people yesterday mentioned that they received some funding from US State Department, right? How many of you went back to the embassy, or how many of you wrote letters to the embassy thanking them? And when you made a mistake, you also you said sorry to the embassy. How many? That's good of you. All those who have raised their hands, you have answered. You see how simple my exercise is. Next question. To me, money is the last thing. To me, money is the last thing in sustaining a project. The things you need to sustain.
I wanted to emphasize that it is very important to say sorry and thank you. Okay? Whenever you're doing anything, including projects, it is very important to say sorry and thank you. Another thing which you should take in mind is projects will never run smoothly. There will always be emerging issues. There will always be some small conflicts. And as a result of that, you should try your best to make sure you reduce the number of conflicts, you reduce the number of constraints that are affecting your projects. So my slogan I use is, try to fail, but don't fail to try. You keep trying, and you must know that you're making a contribution. And to that point, I wanted to highlight some few areas that can help you sustain
the project. One important one is communication. Like marriage, one important one is what? Communication. Communication internally within your team, and communication with the stakeholders, which could be communities, could be government, could be private sector. Am I right? Communication is very important. And then another thing which I wanted to talk about here is team responsibility. Whenever projects have started, sometimes you see a lot of clashes. So you must clearly define team responsibilities. When you are struggling to get the grant, you are together. When the funding comes, you start seeing some gaps developing. And you start seeing somebody not bothering about other team members. So you must maintain the team, you must know your job description, you must know the team responsibility. Do you think that can sustain the project? Do you think? Yeah. Another thing which I wanted to emphasize here is another point which I wanted to emphasize is monitoring and control. It is important to monitor. And how will you monitor these projects? In order to sustain it, you must always report on progress you have made, communicate with the team members, see the reasons for variations. Alright? Sometimes you may want to do this, but you see some variations. See the reasons for the variations, and also take some action to eliminate the variance. That way you will be able to sustain your group, to sustain your projects. And this progress can be reported through regular and formal meetings, reviewing the delegated tasks, and seeing that the actions you are supposed to do at each stage that they are accomplished. In that way, you will help to sustain your projects. And another point that I wanted to emphasize is maintaining balance. You know, whenever your project starts, sometimes the political wing can come in, and when they come to launch a program, they want you to fuel their cars and so on. Sometimes it is not in the budget, and yet if you don't do that, they may not support you. So you really need to maintain a balance. Alright? You need to maintain a balance in terms of costs. If the cost was not planned for, how are you going to meet the emerging costs? You need to maintain the time and the quality of your work. That will be very important. And then another thing which I wanted to talk about is tracking your progress. Sometimes people do the critical path diagrams. He talked about complicated diagrams which can sometimes confuse you, but you make a simple one or the Gantt chart which you follow so that you can track your progress. And then another thing which is very important is listening in relation to communication. You must listen to the communities. You must listen to the project beneficiaries. You must listen to the government in that particular location where you're working, because they are also having a mandate to give services to the people. So you must listen. You must listen also to your team if you want to sustain your project. You must listen to your team members. So that is very important. I'm just highlighting areas which I feel maybe we are not covered. And then you must always keep an eye on the risks that can come and disorganize your project. Problem solving is another point. You must develop solutions to problems. This could be dealing with risk at key stages, solving problems among the team, understanding the causes of those problems, seeking solutions, various solutions from different people. You will talk to your team and this one will give you this solution, another one this solution. Collect all of them and select the best option. Select the best option, sit together and get an agreement and implement the solution. In that way you will sustain your project, you will sustain your organization. So, in summary, I think these are the issues which I wanted to share with you if you want to sustain your project, sustain your organization, in addition to all the things you have asked, all the answers my co-facilitators have shared with you. Thank you so much. I will give you the question.
Yeah, so now we'll take some questions.
Well, actually not question. I just want to share for the last 24 years how we are struggling
the organization. I think for all of you that are forming an NGO, we have two different types of activities. The first activities is that your NGO working for the human rights, the NGO working for the disabled, any kind of activities that you cannot generate income. You should have a very good partner. Nowadays you're lucky because you have what you call it crowdfunding. You can have a friends of disabled, you have to have a routine fundraising. This is what makes your activities can be sustained, because you always have people, you have to have a very good team who approach a good people, that are many of them, who has heart, who want to support their activities, that is impossible in many ways to delay between your activities and economic activities. But the second activities is what I call an NGO that somehow will be merged slowly to become a social entrepreneur. This is where the activities that you are starting, slowly but sure, from your economic activities or what kind of activities you are creating with local community, you can start to have what I call profit activities. But it has to be clearly separated with your social. I give you a very good example. This is what we did then. When we start with clean water supply with the local community, you create a cooperative. Then the cooperative knows well how much you should sell a gallon of your water. And you know which beneficiaries group that need to get the water for free because they are very poor, they are old people. But most of the people Not exactly that they have to pay for the services that they get. Also in the electricity, also an additional, what I call by making a processing unit of agriculture product in rural area. Your NGO are entitled to have a partnership with them, to have a share. Once we build a very small power plant that the electricity connect to the grid, so there is a streaming income, then we collaborate with the local community. Local community has 50% share, and our organization have 50% share. It means that we are helping people in the same time we are sustaining our own activities. This is what's the differences between NGO and social enterprises. Because you're doing the business, in the same time you're solving the social problem. Business beyond money and profit. Last but not least, I would like to talk about what the Henry from the Asian Foundation that's mentioned to you. Yes, I agree. NGO is not a place where all the losers are forming themselves and be together in a group. An NGO is a soul. It's a choices. It's a place where you do not like to be in the corporate sector, but you are professional, you smart, you want to use your heart to help people with your brain. Right? And what, in my experience, yesterday we have a good discussion with other mentors that we have to select what I call cream of the cream from university, which actually he can be hired in the private sector with a double-digit salary, but they prefer to stay in the organization that NGO, for instance, that they strongly believe will give a good impact to our community. This is another really real experience. 2 years ago, many of a great guy, Indonesian, came to us and telling, Mom, I'm graduated from, just name it. Then I went to Nanyang, have a good grade, blah, 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 blah. I've been 7 years in the private. You know what the result? I'm making the company I'm working with richer, and also myself getting richer because he drove a BMW, has an apartment, have a very good salary. But you know what I feel? My life don't have any meaning to poor people. So I quit. I was like shocking to hear that. I quit and I'm willing to do what you were doing. And I said, oh sorry, I cannot hire you because I'm so scared to hear that you got $1,000 US from the previous company. No, I just want you to show me the way so I don't have to start from scratch. Then please, nowadays you find all young people like that, many. If we can get that, those kind of people who actually got the brain, have a strong heart to help people, and they are very smart, you don't have to worry because they are very creative. I feel it very strongly. They know how to get the money. As what Lawrence mentioned, that money is not everything, I agree. If you do something good, there is always a way to find the money. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have to, so that was a really, really informative panel. I know that you all got a lot of different advice, but the mentors will be around all day, so feel free to go and ask anyone other follow-up questions. So these are conversations that they won't end because everybody has their own theories and different personal experiences. So make sure to be open and go up and ask follow-up questions. So we talked about a lot. I just want to go through a lot of different points that that we talked about. Talks about valuing sustainability of your team and learning and deciding who are your allies and making sure that you know that. Making sure that the expectations between you and your donors are very clear. Communication, understanding that communication is key for your team, for your donors. Communication is key. That's a big one. Maintaining balance. listening to the communities that you are serving, listening to the communities that you're working with, and understanding the ASEAN ways of the NGO world, and knowing, you know, if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but understanding the ways. So thank you so much to our panelists.